All right, so it's 1:05 as promised. We're going to be getting started with our presentation. So my name is Laura Dancis, and I'm a career and training counselor with Achieve. Achieve is a nonprofit organization. We're located in Mississauga, but we are currently providing support through my specific program, which I'll speak to a little bit later, throughout Ontario. So for anyone residing in Ontario, you might be eligible for the program. I'll speak to that shortly. Just a reminder that if anyone does have, if anything that we mentioned today is something that you are interested in, but you're not sure if you're eligible or you feel like you aren't based on the information we provided, please follow up. Maybe I can refer you to a similar nonprofit organization that does provide the supports that we provide. And Gavin would be happy to explain the process of the registration for his programs as well. So I'd like to introduce Gavin Simoni, who is a professional engineer. He's been helping clients with licensing steps for the past 10 years. And much of his time is dedicated to aiding internationally educated engineers to make progress towards their professional designation. I will be starting off the presentation today speaking to the Accelerating Career Advancement Program. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Following my presentation, Gavin will be sharing information about the courses available through Practice PP exams. And after that, we'll be getting to all of your questions. So please feel free to write them down in the chat or the Q&A. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Gavin, are you able to see the presentation right now?
Yep, that's good.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So I'm going to get started to close that off. So like I said, my name is Laura Dancis. I'm a career and training counselor. I work with Achieve, which is a nonprofit organization, and my particular program is called Accelerating Career Advancement. It is funded by the Government of Canada, so it's a free program to access, and we're in partnership with Meridian Credit Union. The program, Accelerating Career Advancement, provides support to internationally trained professionals. I'll talk a little bit about, if you are an internationally trained professional, how you can register with the program, what the objectives of the program are, what the eligibility is, what the features are. So we do have a loan and we have one-on-one free career counseling. I'll explain how to access the supports, and I'll leave my contact information. I won't linger too much on the last slide because I will be emailing everyone who is on the call and who has registered with my contact details at the end. So we work with internationally trained professionals who are from both regulated and non-regulated professions. The objective of the program is to support internationally trained individuals to access the Canadian labor market, to support the process related to foreign credential recognition, as well as assessment. So if you're an internationally trained engineer, you need to have your credentials recognized here in Canada if you would like to become an engineer. Many of you have already had, potentially had your credentials assessed through WES or through the regulatory bodies in the provinces that you're located in. The third objective of the Accelerating Career Advancement Program is to facilitate accessibility of a loan and monitor the repayments. And last but not least is to provide one-on-one career counseling over the course of the program and the loan period. So in terms of eligibility for my specific program, you need to be a permanent resident, Canadian citizen, or convention refugee. You need to be residing in Ontario, and you have to have completed education outside of Canada, or you have to have work experience in a trade outside of Canada. In terms of the loan, the minimum that you can borrow is $1,500 and the maximum is $15,000. So we've partnered with Meridian Credit Union. They're the financial lender. At the moment, the interest rate is prime plus 2%. Prime is determined by Bank of Canada, so that can fluctuate up or down, and Meridian Credit Union is 2%. So in total, the interest rate is 4.45%. The repayment is 30 days after the money is deposited into your account. But if you are finding it challenging with the repayment, then we can have that conversation and see if we can defer the repayment or just focus on the interest for a certain period of time. In terms of the repayment, it's anywhere from 1 to 4 years, depending on what you would like and how much you borrow. You can repay the loan at any time. There's no penalty, there's no clause. So let's say you borrow the funds and within 6 months or a year or even a few weeks, you don't need it anymore, or you found a job and you want to get rid of the loan, you can repay faster every month, or you can repay the full thing all at once. You do not need credit history in order to apply. But with that said, there is a credit check. So I had a client a few months back that applied for this loan. She was in the country for 4 days, and there was no issue in her getting this loan, even though she didn't have any credit history. On the flip side, if someone's credit history is extremely low or they've declared bankruptcy in the past, it would be a challenge to access the loan. If you're not sure what your credit score is, or if you have good credit history, feel free to have that conversation with us, reach out. Our counselors, and myself included, have done hundreds of loans, and we've done a lot of financial assessments with clients. So we're familiar with what would have a stronger likelihood of getting approved versus a loan that might not get approved because of credit reasons. In terms of what the finances can go for, it's pretty broad. Any program, any prep courses, any exams, if you need to translate your documents, if you need to travel, or if you have living expenses while you're completing a prep course or while you're completing a post-secondary program, whatever it is, this can go towards covering those costs. Let's say you're an engineer, but you're looking to do something slightly different. Maybe that can also pay towards alternative careers. So it doesn't have to be, if you were an engineer back home and you're becoming or wanting to become an engineer here, that's great. You can apply for the loan. But if you're looking to do something completely different or somewhat different, it can also be put towards covering those expenses. Any qualification assessment fees, any examination fees, any association fees. The loan can go towards anything that you feel would help you find a job in Canada. In terms of the one-on-one career counseling, we don't have groups or workshops that you're required to attend. We do an assessment with you to see where you're at, where you want to be, and we identify the training that you need to complete. If you're looking for work and you need help with your resume or your cover letter or your LinkedIn, if you need to have your credentials assessed and you're not sure where to go, if you need support in understanding the process of becoming licensed in Ontario, then we can help you with that. I have a lot of clients that do get an interview and then they do interview prep with me, which is helpful to kind of help you understand the questions that might be asked of you and the structure that you should be using when responding to those questions. If you're looking for labor market information, let's say you're not sure what the labor market is like in Canada for someone who's an internationally trained engineer looking to become a technologist or something, even an engineer, then we can provide you with that information. If you are looking to do a program and you're not sure what the fees would be, how that would work into your budget, we can sit down and do a career action plan, like I said, to get you from where you are today to where you would want to be. And we also can help you with developing a learning plan. So really break down the cost so that you're completely understanding what the fees would be in order to get you licensed or to complete a training. The program path, so registering for the program is pretty straightforward. You would need to send an email to me, and I'll be leaving my contact details at the end. You would just need to send me an email. Let me know if you're interested in the career counseling or the loan or both, and then we would go from there. If you're interested in the career counseling, we would conduct a one-on-one assessment to see what your needs are. If you're interested in the loan, then I would provide you with information on the application, which we could either complete together or you could complete at your own time. I would submit it to Meridian Credit Union. They would be the ones to distribute the funds because Achieve is nonprofit. We don't deal with the fund distribution. And then every 3, 6, and 12 months after, we would do a follow-up. So I'm not going to linger on this page because I will be posting my contact details inside the chat. And also I'll be sending an email to everyone following this conversation. So we do have a few people that just joined the call while I was chatting. So I would like to introduce our next guest speaker. And just a reminder, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll get to them once Gavin has provided information on the practice PPE exams. So once again, just to introduce Gavin, he is a professional engineer who has been helping clients with licensing steps for the last 10 years. His time is mostly dedicated to aiding internationally educated engineers to make progress towards their professional designation. And with that said, Gavin, the floor is all yours. I'll be here. I'll just shut down my video and my microphone.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It might be afternoon or morning, depending on where in Canada you're calling in from, or perhaps internationally as well. I'm just going to share my presentation, and then how's that look on your end, Laura? Is it okay? You might be muted.
I was muted. It looks good, and it's the full screen,
Okay.
so it's visible. Very, very nice.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, Laura, for doing the first half of the presentation and providing such great resources and courses to engineers or people who might be pursuing other career opportunities. In this presentation, I want to talk about the licensing process in Canada, specifically for non-Canadian graduates. So our roadmap for today, what I'm going to be covering is experience of practice PPE exams. Really briefly, the focus is not on our company today, it's on you and your licensing process. Why would you want to become licensed and what it means in Canada to become licensed? What are the requirements for getting a professional engineering designation? If you can't get the PEng right away, or maybe it's going to be a couple of years off, what can you do in the meantime? What alternatives do you have to the PEng? What is a typical route for internationally trained engineers to become licensed in Canada? We'll look at that. How much is it going to cost to do these different licensing steps, and what kind of financial relief you have along the way? And then we'll get to your questions. So some of the information here you'll already know, and it might be straightforward, and maybe you've already done some of these steps. So the question and answer period is really where we can dig into your particular situation. So the experience of myself, Gavin Simoni, I was licensed, or I'm still licensed in Alberta as a PEng and hold my lead accredited professional designation as well. And I've been helping aspiring engineers with different licensing steps for over 10 years. And in those 10 years, we've helped over 10,000 clients, either with free courses, with paid courses, or with services such as experience record reviews. And we focus most of our help on the three most challenging licensing steps that any aspiring engineer faces. And that's the MPPE, which is the law and ethics exam, the experience reporting, which could be called the competency-based assessment in some provinces, and in other provinces, it might be called the experience record. And lastly, we help with the technical exams as well for certain technical exams. Now, I should say that the licensing process has always changed, and it's changed quite a bit over the 10 years that I've been doing this. So we always keep our material updated, but when something new comes out, it's always mentioned first on our newsletter, because we're always talking with our clients or reading association websites. So we're pretty good at being able to pick up on any changes. So if you're not already on our newsletter and you're in the process of becoming licensed, then that's a great spot to do. And there's a link for that on this page. So why would you want to become licensed in Canada? Because in certain countries, engineering licensing is not a thing you can just, if you think you're qualified, you can provide engineering services. But in Canada, it's different. So a license is needed to practice engineering. And if you practice engineering in Canada without being licensed, there are penalties and there's fines and other consequences. So it's something that you want to be aware of in every province, every territory in Canada. So providing engineering services to the public, where the public is defined as someone other than you or your employer, your firm will need a couple of different things. It needs a certificate or a permit. And the certificate or permit is an extra layer of an extra step that just helps to demonstrate to clients that you have maybe insurance, that you have a quality control procedure, those type of things. It's basically like an extra layer of safety for the public. And the firm also needs a licensed employee or employees to take responsibility for the professional work products that are being delivered to other parties. There's also a financial benefit. As you work towards your PEng and you become a professional engineer, your company is going to be able to bill more for your time, and they're also going to be able to win more projects. And as a result, they're going to be able to compensate you better. So over the lifetime of your career, if you're licensed versus non-licensed, it can be quite a significant difference. Let's look at what it takes to become a PEng here in Canada. So there's some basic requirements that everyone has to satisfy. The first is your education requirement. So it's, if you don't have a Canadian undergraduate, which if you're internationally educated, you won't, your association will look at your transcripts and compare that to a Canadian undergraduate equivalent. And then if there's any gaps, you'll have to fill those gaps, and we'll discuss that in a bullet point further below. You need 4 years of engineering experience with 1 year of engineering experience in Canada or a similar environment, perhaps like the United States. You have to pass your law and ethics exam, which is called the National Professional Practice Exam, and that's written 5 times per year, so there's lots of opportunities to write that. You have to be 18 years of age or older, which isn't really an issue for most people who have gone through university. You have to be of good character. This is tested during the application process. A 2-page questionnaire will be sent to your references, and based on that, they'll judge if your character is adequate or not. And then there's some additional requirements which don't apply to everyone, but it really depends on your unique situation. And these would be technical exams. So if your undergraduate degree from your home country is much different than the Canadian equivalent, then you might have to write technical exams to fill those gaps. Certain provinces use the interview process, such as Ontario and BC, to speed up the technical exam process. So instead of writing, maybe 10 technical exams, they could have an interview, ask you technical questions, and then waive some of those exams. Courses are also something that could be assigned by your association to sort of match that Canadian undergraduate equivalent. So if you can't get the PEng right now, for whatever reason, perhaps maybe you've been working in sales for your entire career, or project management, or somewhere where you haven't been applying engineering on a day-to-day basis, then we should look at some other options. So if you have been following the engineering path, a provisional license is offered in some provinces, and it's a way to demonstrate to employers that you have met all the requirements of a PEng except for the Canadian experience. So you have enough experience, enough international experience, you have the right age, your education has been improved, and you're getting close. And with that, and getting that job will help you reach that PEng within a short amount of time. So it's valid for 12 months. So the associations in Canada that do offer it don't want you to become a provisional licensee forever. It's really a stepping stone to get to your PEng. And you must work under PEng, so you cannot stamp or seal final professional work products on your own. But there are other options, as I was talking to earlier, if your career is taking a slightly different path where it's somewhat technical, but not really perhaps doing engineering design work. And you might find yourself managing projects. And in this case, a PMP, a project management professional designation, might make more sense. Or let's just say you're working for a contractor on green building projects. In that case, a LEED accredited professional designation might be more suitable for right now. And then maybe in the months or years down the road, you might find yourself back on a technical path, and then you can pick up that PEng process later on. So the typical application path, you're going to start with the application, and you're going to send in your proof of age. You're going to send in your transcripts, and your association is going to do an academic assessment. And if your school, your university back home has already been approved and the curriculum's already been approved by Engineers Canada, then you're going to go through and you're going to be exempt, and you won't have to jump through any more hurdles for the academic assessment. But if there's some gaps between your education and the Canadian equivalent, then you'll likely be assigned some technical exams. And in Ontario or BC, you might be also, you might have the option of doing an interview as well. So once you pass all those different steps, you've met the academic requirement, then you can write your law and ethics exam, which is the NPPE. And following that, then you can submit your 4 years of experience and receive your PEng. So it's important to do these different steps in sequence, because if you try and write the NPPE right away without having applied, then you're going to study, and it might be a year or two before you actually are eligible to sit for that exam. So make sure you just talk with your association and find out what the next step is for you, and you work on that one step at a time. Now, the total process from start to finish, it can range anywhere from 1 year to 4 years if you're consistently working at it. And if you don't have too many technical exams to write, if your academic assessment goes smoothly, then you might be looking at it closer to 2 years of total time. Okay, now let's look at the fees for licensing. So what is this going to cost you as you go through the process, and what's the ongoing cost as well? So the application fee for them to review your academic documents, and also covers the experience review later on in the process. It ranges between $300 to $500 depending on the association. Writing the law and ethics exam is around $250 for each sitting, so hopefully you'll pass it on your first attempt. And then technical exams, they can range from $200 to $700 per exam. Some associations have a higher initial cost, and then it's less expensive for each following exam, and then other associations have a sort of a mid-range cost for every exam. And then once you've been approved for your license, there's a registration fee which covers your seal and covers some paperwork to finish it off and get you registered. So the total can really range from $800 to several $1,000s depending on how many technical exams you have to write, depending if you self-study for these steps before, do them on your own, or if you buy textbooks and take courses to sort of help you with this process. It can really range from a low amount to something that can get quite high. And then there's an ongoing fee for license holders, which ranges from $265 to about $450, and that's something that has to be paid annually. But there is help. There's help out there, so there are programs to make those costs more manageable for you as you go through this process. The first thing you can do is you can ask your engineering or geoscience association about a financial credit program. So often if you've been in Canada for 6 months or less, they might have a program for you. But even if you've been for longer, you can still email them and find out if there's any incentives for you where they might waive one of those fees or reduce your fees somehow. Another thing is if you're currently employed, you can ask your manager about supporting you through this process if you can expense any of these fees. So maybe the course fee or textbook fees or application fees, something to help you with this process. And then going back to Laura's earlier presentation, a low interest loan is another thing to keep in mind, whether you're pursuing your engineering designation or if you're doing something else in your career and you want some financial relief there. So with that, that's kind of the licensing process in a nutshell. Now we can open it up to questions to get more specific feedback from everyone. And there's my email there if anyone thinks of a question later, or if you're watching a recorded version of this this webinar.
Hi, Gavin. Thank you so much. While you were speaking, there were a few questions that were asked. So what I'll do is I'll just read those questions out. Okay, so we'll start with the first one. So someone mentioned that they have an architectural technology degree from back home, but they have not been able to get licensed in Canada. So are there programs that go back and that would be able to put you back on track? So yes, there are programs. I am personally familiar with the Ontario programs if you're outside of Ontario. So if you're asking a question about licensing, and it might be helpful to mention the province that you are looking to become licensed in. But for the architectural programs, I am familiar with the Ontario ones. I will be sending my email out after, so if you'd like to get in touch with me and I can send you a list of those programs, then you can follow up with them. Someone asked if they're outside of Canada planning to migrate, are they eligible to take the license? Gavin, would you like to respond to this one?
Yeah, so pretty much every province does allow you to start the process from abroad. There are a few where you're not allowed to, and I can't think of them off the top of my head, but most of them recognize that you might be, you haven't located here just yet. And they've all removed the requirement that you have to be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident. So you don't have to have your status sort of as a permanent or a resident. So that really allows you to start the process much earlier, because the process, as we talked about earlier, can take a few years. So it's good to get started as soon as you can.
Yeah, so in Ontario, for example, you can begin providing documents of your qualifications for assessment, so and any fees that could begin the licensing process. For anyone moving to Ontario, you would be doing the licensing process through the PEO, and just make sure that you read the licensing guide, because it's not just submitting your documents. If the documents are not in English, then they need to be translated. They can only be translated by someone who's a member of the Association of Translators or someone who's a Canadian professional engineer. So there are certain requirements that would need to be included in the documents that you submit. It's not like having your credentials assessed through WES and then submitting those credentials to the PEO. It would have to be a different set of documents, and there are certain criteria when you submit it. There was another question here. Is it required to have the 1 year of work experience under the supervision of a PEO, which I believe you did speak to? Did you want to just reiterate that response?
Yeah, so that's one of the mandatory requirements in every region. So that there's no really getting around that. The only way is with the provisional license. And again, it doesn't get around that, but it just communicates that you've had a lot of experience, just not that 1 year of Canadian experience under a PNG. So that's a good stepping stone to get your PNG, but you still should be on the lookout for an employment arrangement where you can work under the supervision of a PNG.
There was a question here from Raul. The question was, how can you know for sure if you're recognized as being eligible for PNG, and how is it acknowledged by the relevant association? So for example, to those relocating to Alberta, there's actually a couple of questions here. So why don't I let you answer that one, and then I'll break down the rest of them.
That's a good question. That's one that I think the associations probably I'll get a lot, and sometimes we get a lot. Is how do I know if I'm going to be accepted or not? And nobody knows until you start sending your documents and they review them, because everyone's work situation is different. Everyone's worked for different employers for different lengths of time, worked on different projects, and is able to articulate those experiences in different ways. So it really, it's something that no one can say 100%. If we were to look at kind of your experiences, we might be able to, give you a rough estimate of how it's going to go or what you might need more of. But the best thing to do is just get started with the process, and then you'll get a clear answer at that time. Now, it's not, your associations will never say no, you can never have a PN. They'll just say if it's a no, it's a not right now kind of answer.
Some of the repeated questions here are if the education that's the assessment provided through WES, World Education Services, that a lot of people have to have done in order to immigrate. So that's more for immigration purposes. WES, ICAS, or any other type of assessment would not be substantial for the licensing process transcript. So like I briefly mentioned, you would have to make sure that if you're thinking of moving to Canada, or if you're currently residing in Canada, check what the regulatory body is in your province. That regulatory body for engineers would have a process specifically for internationally trained professionals, and it would break down, and it's very specific. So the PEO in Ontario has a breakdown of what the transcripts are that you should be submitting and what the format is. So if it's educational transcripts, who can translate, what you need to include in that package. So WES is not going to be relevant in this situation. So the next question is, does having a master's in engineering help reduce the 1 year for 4-year experience required for the PN?
Yes, so of the 4-year experience, total of experience, if your master's is a non-course based master's, then it would count as 1 year. So assuming that it's related to your undergraduate degree. So if you did a civil engineering degree and then your master's was in a civil engineering area and it was a non-course based master's, then your association would likely give you 1 year of experience towards your 4 years for that master's.
Thank you.
But it won't give you the 1 year under a PN supervision. That's a separate 1 year requirement.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but what would you say is one of the most challenging pieces for internationally trained engineers who are going through the process to anticipate as being one of the more difficult, I guess, requirements to complete?
I think it's different. Some people have challenges with the NPPE, just because the questions are long and your time, so you have to kind of rush through it. Other people have trouble finding work, so they need that 1 year of experience, and that can be a big hurdle. And then some people really don't want to write up their experience, which can maybe be 35 pages long in some provinces. So it really depends on the strengths and weaknesses of the individual and kind of their likes and dislikes as well, depending on So essentially, like with all the different steps, there's going to be different requirements, whether it's verbal or writing or whatever. So it really depends on their interest level and strengths and weaknesses.
Thank you. This would be your area of expertise, but what would be the difference between Alberta and Ontario licensing process?
So in Ontario, they use the interview more for if someone has a lot of technical exams to write, they would potentially let them attend an interview to waive some of those exams. In Alberta, they sometimes give people, instead of writing maybe 8 technical exams, they can write the FE exam, which is written in the United States. So the Fundamentals of Engineering exam, they can do that, which is a 6-hour exam instead of a whole bunch of 3-hour exams. So those are two of the main differences. But other than that, it's fairly similar across Canada in terms of the process.
And then Shema, you said, I'm that you're in Etobicoke in Ontario. Your diploma is from Afghanistan. I don't see a question attached, so I'm going to move on to the next questions. But please, if you could ask us the question that you wanted to ask. I'm not sure what to get from that, and I don't want to answer or not answer correctly. So Shema, if you could just rewrite the question lower, and I'll get to that shortly. There's a question here. Can you speak to the mutual recognition with professional bodies from other countries and which province has them?
So I believe that's all on the Engineers Canada website. You'll be able to find the partnership agreements. Yeah, they have the arrangement there, and then I'm not 100% sure if the associations have to follow that or if it's just a recommendation. So they might still want to compare the two, but again, that's something that might be up to their discretion. But the best place to start would be the Engineers Canada website, and it should be fairly easy to search. But if not, just send me an email. I can send you that link.
The question here is, Wes evaluated my documents as a bachelor's degree, 4 years as an electrical engineer. So where do I start from? Can you please guide me clearly?
So I typically your association will say, okay, we need your transcripts evaluated by this service, Wes or whoever it is, and then Wes will send that information directly to your association, and then your association will get back to you with the next steps. So it's usually not the applicant's job to interpret Wes's findings. It's usually just to wait for your association to sort of make their ruling and their decision. So I would talk to your association, see if they have those documents, or see how that Wes or whoever is going to transfer them over. And then it's really just for you to wait and sort of follow their direction.
Okay. Do we need to submit the experience details with the application?
That, going back to my earlier slide, that's for a lot of associations, it's been deferred. So it used to be with your initial application, you would submit your experience record or competency assessment, but now you just start the application for most provinces, and then they'll do the academic assessment first, and then you'll write the NPPE, and then you'll do the experience record or competency assessment towards the end.
Okay. There's a question here. I'm not quite understanding, but do all referees have to be from the Canadian jurisdiction?
No, they don't. Again, you want to look at the wording from your association in their experience guidebook, and most of them say that they would prefer 2 PNG references out of your list of however many you're going to give them, and PNG mostly indicates that they're in Canada, working in Canada. So the more PNG references you can give, the better. But some people won't have any if they don't have any Canadian experience. So just work with your association within their rules and recommendations, and give as many PNG references as you can.
Could you please elaborate further on the license requirements, as I'm currently residing outside of Canada and would like to apply in Alberta? So I think what I'll do there is I'll send, when I do send the email today after the presentation, I'll include the links to the regulatory bodies. And that way, if you're going to be going to a specific province, you can see there, because some of the details, well, they're quite specific, so we don't want to miss out on anything. Gavin, did you want to fill in on that, or would that be okay with you if I send the link?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the best way to do it. Some of the provinces have a questionnaire to kind of get a better, which is attached to the application process. So as you start the process, it'll ask you a whole bunch of questions, and then it'll kind of say, well, you're eligible for the PNG, or you're eligible for EIT or whatever. So some associations will have that. So yeah, best to start with the association's website if they have a questionnaire, or they just have the general application. Read it through, make a list of what you need to do, and then you can ask help with the association if there's anything that you don't understand.
Yeah, and also there's different categories, there's different requirements. So let's say you're outside of Canada, but you have a Canadian citizenship. It might be slightly different than if you're outside of Canada and you don't hold Canadian citizenship or permanent residency. So another thing to consider also is your status and what the requirements are there in terms of what you can actually do when you have the status versus when you don't have the status. The question, okay, so this is, I think, going back to a previous question. Does a master's in engineering help to only need 3 instead of 4 years for the PN in Ontario? The 1-year experience is clear that it is mandatory, but does having the master's minimize the amount of time that you would need to study?
Yeah, this goes back to the other question, just about, so you need 4 years total. If you have a master's and it's related to your degree, then you need 3 years total, but you still need that 1 year of Canadian experience within that remaining 3 year, 1 year of Canadian experience under a PN within that last three years that this person hasn't.
I think then we're on the same page. It's an anonymous poster, but I think that was how they had understood it as well. But if not, please follow up with a question. If during my academic review, specifically by APGS, outcome is work experience reporting in the competency assessment system, and the reported experience is acceptable, will I be awarded the designation of engineer in training?
Usually engineering training is not is a separate application process. So you usually just pay your $100 fee or whatever it is. And then you're able to use that title, and there's a few other benefits like networking, and some associations you can submit your experience every year and have it reviewed. So if you're talking about your competency-based assessment, which is the experience part, that is typically working towards your PN, which is totally different than the EIT process. So when you're approved for a PN, you don't get an EIT as well, because an EIT is kind of a designation you use, or MIT, before you get the PN. So you won't get an EIT or MIT or anything like that as a result of submitting your experience. And typically a member in training or an engineering intern is for people with a Canadian undergraduate degree. It's not commonly given to internationally educated applicants, but there may be exceptions to that.
If an individual has a mechanical and master's in robotics, which engineering discipline should they select?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think personally, I guess the recommendation that I would make is depending on the career that you would like to ultimately have. I don't think that one would be easier than the other. And I don't know if it would be required to be an engineer. You could do something similar here as an alternative while you wait, if you are deciding to do the licensing, but you can do something in automation that doesn't necessarily require you to be an engineer. But if you were to select one, I think it depends on the career outcome.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I've answered this in the past is just that your association is going to look at it whatever lens you tell them you want them to look through it. So if you say, I'm applying to be a civil engineer, they're going to say, okay, let's look at your academics in that lens. Let's look at your experience in that lens. So you can pick whatever you want, but if you're picking, let's just say, civil engineer, and you're a mechanical engineer, you did a mechanical engineering degree, there's going to be gaps in your education. You're going to have maybe some similar courses in year 1 and year 2, but you're going to have to go back and fill in all those gaps. So you have to take a look at your mechanical and your robotics overlap and find out what you want to do in your career path going forward. And then you have to realize that if you choose, the mechanical stream, but you've had a lot of robotics experience, there might be some gaps there. Or if you choose the robotics stream, but you have a bachelor in mechanical, there might be gaps. So either way, there's different ways that your association can look at it.
Okay. Someone said that they'd moved to Canada. The only experience is in Canada. How many years work experience under a PN would you need to have in BC? That would be 1 year.
Right. Yeah, so, just 1 year.
Yeah, so you would need to find work under the supervision of a licensed engineer, and then they would have to sign off on uh, acknowledging that they have been supervising you for that year. And I believe in some provinces they need to write a letter. So there's a little bit of work on their part. There are some programs that I know of from nonprofit organizations that do provide you with like a placement, and then that placement goes towards answering that 1 year experience requirement for engineers. It doesn't exist in all provinces. There's a program in Ontario and London. There's a program in Nova Scotia, and I could check to see if there's one in BC or Alberta as well. But some challenges in finding work is that you're not licensed as an engineer, but then you're not going to get hired unless you're an engineer. So it's a bit of a tricky situation to be in. So there are some nonprofit organizations that offer free support and free placements, and they'll place you under the supervision of an engineer. So if you're planning on moving to Canada, or if you're living in Canada right now, check the province you're planning to move to. And I would say start sooner rather than later, because these spots do fill up. See what you can do about getting a placement through a nonprofit organization. Okay. I have a bachelor's degree from Turkey and I want to work as a civil engineer in Canada. Which way is the fast and good way to do my job?
Sorry, could you repeat? I heard Turkey and I didn't hear the rest of it.
So Mustafa is saying that he has a bachelor's degree from Turkey and he wants to work as a civil engineer in Canada. So what would be the best way to do that? And I guess my question then, Mustafa, is if you are not licensed as an engineer back home, you would not be able to become an engineer in Canada through the licensing process. You would have to go to school to become a civil engineer. If you don't care to be an engineer, like you don't care to have that title, right now, depending on your province, but I would say majority of provinces have a very big shortage in the construction field. There's a lot of things that you can do that is maybe similar to civil engineer, construction project management. A lot of the clients that I work with are going into pathways where they're not going to be recognized as an engineer, or they were not an engineer back home, and they don't want to do a 3-year program and write the exams, and they end up doing something similar but in an alternative career, but similar to civil infrastructure. So I don't know if that's a pathway that you might consider, but if you don't have a bachelor's degree or a degree in civil engineering from back home, you would have to do the education piece here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's sort of, if you're a technologist or technician, engineering technician from back home, then there's kind of programs. If there's a partnership between the provincial association for technologists and engineers, and sometimes you can go that way. But yeah, if you don't have the education back home, then it's the first piece of the puzzle. So you need the schooling, and you need to build on that education with the experience. You can't have experience and then build the education on later. That doesn't really work that way.
I see a question here. This is the answer of question 1. Shema, I think that you mentioned earlier, I believe that you had asked the question about living in Ontario and having your diploma from Afghanistan. If you wouldn't mind just framing it as a question, and if you'd like, maybe what I can do is I'll send you an email after, and we can talk about this over the phone if you have any questions. I'm not quite sure that I'm understanding what the question is at this time, but I'd really like to make sure that you get the right answer. So I'll follow up with you after the presentation today. Someone is asking a question about having 5 years experience as a mining engineer in Ghana and currently working on the CBA for APGS to get an EIT from outside of Canada. They received a failed report. Most of the comments are centered on the explanation of the situation. Is there a possibility of getting a template for a mining engineer? Is the template like a template of the job description?
I think that's just examples. So in our course, we have different examples for different disciplines, but we don't cover all 50 different disciplines and streams. But if that person wants to email me directly, then I can see if I can help further with specific mining examples. But yeah, essentially, when you're submitting your experience reporting, you want to make sure that you're providing unique situations that are challenging and at a professional level, but it's a little bit beyond the scope of this presentation. So I'll leave it for the one-on-one conversation unless anyone else has any questions about that.
Okay, also just a helpful thing is sometimes the Canadian NOC codes that you would need, and you might be familiar with the NOC codes if you're doing this for your immigration, the Canadian NOC codes. So I just sent the link to you for the mining. So sometimes it's helpful to see what the government of Canada has described as being the main duties of a mining engineer, and then to see how you can cross compare your experience so that you're maybe hitting those points. Can the confirmatory exams be waived based on the outcome of the academic assessment?
Yeah, I guess that's really the purpose, right? You're doing an academic assessment to see if there's any gaps in that person's experience, and the technical exams are based on any the gaps of the academics. So yeah, some people have them all waived if they're from an approved university or if their academic assessment was identical or pretty close to the Canadian equivalent. So yeah, not everybody writes technical exams. It's not something that is required for everyone.
Okay, I have a question here. It's a little bit lengthy, so just bear with me, but I'll try to break it down into the points. So I've written the NPPE yesterday after studying with your course. So Gavin, I'm assuming that's your course. We don't provide courses here.
Yeah,
the question
I think so.
The question is regarding the experience reporting. So they studied civil engineering and have submitted 2.5 years worth of oil sands and city infrastructure experience, which was submitted and approved. However, the past 4 years, this individual has been working at the shipyard in Halifax in shipbuilding, which is not quite civil, though there's some steel structure work involved. The involvement has been predominantly project management. They're a little worried that the shipbuilding experience won't be looked on favorably when submitted, since it seems to be out of the technical theory, since it's primarily project management. Do we have any insight? I'm a registered EIT as well and have already earned a PMP.
Right. So the nice thing about the competency-based assessment process, where it's mainly used in BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, is that it's only asking for one example out of the 22 or 34 examples at a time. So you don't have to provide a whole bunch of different examples that are technical. So as long as you have a few to fulfill the technical requirement, the technical competencies, which are 1.1 to 1.10, then for the other ones, 2.1 to either 6.5 or 7.3, you can use project management examples. You can use other ones where you're developing reports or you're solving issues with coworkers. So it's a lot less technical. So don't feel like you have to spend every waking hour in a technical capacity. As long as you have a couple of years of technical experience, you can draw on those experiences for your technical section and then just use your other experience for the other parts.
There was a question again about the work experience. So just a reminder for anyone, if you are moving to Canada or if you're residing in Canada, it doesn't really matter which province you're in, you will need to have 1 year of work experience under the supervision of an engineer. Gavin, just a heads up, I did a scroll through the chat and we're almost done with the Q&A in the Q&A section, but there are quite a few questions in the chat.
Okay.
Do you prefer that we respond to those in email or how are you doing for time?
I guess why don't we take 2 more, and then if we can have them email us, or if we can, I don't know, are we able to save a list of these and get back to them one by one?
Yes, you can do that.
Or do they have their emails with?
So everyone who's registered, I do have their emails. What I'll be doing is following the presentation today, I will be sending an email to everyone with my information and with Gavin's information. So you can send us an email to inquire more about the courses that are offered through practice PPE exams. And a lot of these courses would help you in writing the exams that you need and provide you with a community, like a support community as well. So he would be the best contact for that. And if anyone is looking for the financial support aspect or career support aspect, then that would be my contact. So why don't we get through a couple more questions. I will copy the questions that we have from there, and we can just do some follow-ups if needed. Okay. So there was a question here about someone being an industrial engineer from Pakistan. How do they get licensed here? They were only licensed as a first level in Pakistan, so registered engineer.
The process is going to be similar for every country coming, regardless of where you were educated. You're going to start with the application process on your association's website, and they're likely going to have that same kind of 4-step process. First one is going to be your academic assessment. They're going to look at translated transcripts. And then if you don't quite measure up to a Canadian equivalent, you're going to write exams and then NPPE, experience reporting, and then license. So that's pretty much the process. So I would just follow that one step at a time. Go to your association's website, download the guide, start the process, send your transcripts, and then just wait for their feedback.
Someone has worked under multiple PN supervisors for more than a year, but under a new PN supervisor kind of every time. It's been less than a year under that last one. Can the new PN supervisor serve as the validator or reference, or can they get like an accumulation of references put together from all of the supervisors that they had that were licensed?
Yeah, usually you there's kind of a summary of your experience when you submit, and then you'll say, I work from this company from this date to this date. My title was this, my supervisor was this. So they'll be able to sort of add up all those months and realize that you had 12 or more months under a PN. So it doesn't, you don't need kind of one supervisor to be with you for your entire duration. You can add up sort of different time periods.
Okay. Last question. So I have a bachelor's degree from outside of Canada, master's degree from from outside of Canada is the bachelor's, inside Canada is master's. What do they meet the academic assessment requirements for the PO, or do they have to go through the technical exams and the whole process?
You still have to go to the main piece of the education puzzle is the bachelor's degree. It's not the master's degree. So the master's degree, you might be able to get the 1 year of your 4 years of experience towards that. But they're still going to have to go through the academic assessment for their bachelor's degree. And then after that's done, they can worry about how many years they have left to do. But yeah, the master's in Canada doesn't get them out of not doing the bachelor's in Canada, which has to be assessed by an education body like West.
Thank you so much. I know that there are some people on the call that didn't get their questions answered. So again, we'll be sending out an email. Feel free to follow up with us. I do have the questions that I've put to the side, so we'll try to get through those questions as well. But if we don't, please just give us a call, send us an email, and we'll try to support you to the best of our ability. Gavin, thank you so much for your time and for joining me again in the presentation. Again, it was recorded, so we can share the link to where that will be located following the presentation today. I'm going to throw up a quick poll for everyone because I forgot to do the earlier polls, but this is just the program or the webinar evaluation. So I'm just going to launch this. If you wouldn't mind just taking a moment to respond, let us know if you found the presentation to be beneficial to your knowledge, if it helped you become more familiar or comfortable in knowing where to go and the supports that could be available to you. It was just a 1 hour presentation. If there's something we didn't get to or that you were hoping to hear today that you didn't, again, you'll have our contact details and we can speak to you at a later time. Great. I'm going to give it. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. So
thank you, Laura.
Gavin, have a great day, and I'll be ending that soon. So thank you so much for sharing your poll results. I appreciate your feedback. All right, Gavin. Bye, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody. See you again.
Bye.